Well, good evening, everyone. This is the April 29th, 2021 hearing of the Milton Board of Appeals on the application for the residences at East Milton Square. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals, Town of Milton. With me this evening, fellow board members Jeffrey Mullen and Nicholas Gray. The purpose of the hearing this evening is to hear from the applicant and the landscape design people, and possibly get an update from Jennifer Corcoran if she chooses to do that. So, Mr. Freeman, is your landscape architect on board here?
I hope so. Jen, do you know if she's here? Her name is, if you folks running the show can see, Jade Cummings from Terra Inc.
I was looking at your application, and she's got a tremendous resume.
She's
very impressive.
Right. So hopefully she is here. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, again, for the record. Peter Freeman representing the applicant, and Jennifer Corcoran from the applicant is also here. So we want to do exactly what you just said, Mr. Leonard. First, have Jade give a presentation on landscaping. And then Jen indeed will make a few remarks and discuss a few things. I don't think lengthy. And, you know, that's all that we plan to do tonight, because I know it was the focus. I just want to mention one thing, because although I couldn't make the last hearing, but we do have, we're working on comments on the planning director's letter that mentioned a few things back about a couple of weeks ago. So we don't want you to think that we're ignoring that. But we're going to put some responses together and get them to you before the next hearing, which is now 3 weeks away. So we'll do that and try to be, thorough and cover those things and discuss them at the next hearing.
Right. That'd be very much appreciated. Thank you.
So I don't know if your IT people can tell if Jade is showing somewhere.
She is not. This is Bev. She's on.
Jen, of course, you could go first, but do you have a cell phone or text number to try to contact Jade?
Yeah, let me get in touch with her. I spoke with her earlier today, so.
I don't know. I mean, if she goes on the town website, the link is right on the Board of Appeals link.
Right, okay, let me see. I think that she had a little bit of trouble getting on the, let's send her the link.
Unless there's another name I should be looking for.
That is the only one. So let's see.
Right.
Oh, hold on one second. Sorry about that. Just a little bit of Zoom trouble. Let's send her the updated.
Otherwise, you'll have to talk about landscape design.
Okay.
I definitely wouldn't do as great of a job as she will do. So we'll give her a minute.
While we're waiting for Ms. Cummings, let me just ask, is Attorney Anthony Riley present out there in virtual land?
Oh, we do have a Tony Riley. Yes.
That's right. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Riley, are you unmuted?
He's just coming on now.
Oh, okay, great. Tell me when he's all.
There we are. Yep.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, I'm here. I was raising my hand. Thank you for mentioning my name.
Good. Well, I was just going to tell everybody that I did receive an email from Attorney Gallivan indicating that he was not able to be personally present, and that Attorney Tony Riley of his office was going to fill in for him. So Welcome to the Board of Appeals, Mr. Riley.
Thank you.
Good, it's good to have you here. We've just had a little difficulty getting the landscape architect for the applicant, Miss Jade Cummings, online, but she's working away
He's
furious.
on now.
I've been watching. I've seen.
Oh, great.
We did it.
We did it.
Thank you, Jen.
No problem. Sorry about the Zoom mix up on my part.
No problem. It's nice to be here.
Well, welcome to the Board of Appeals, Ms. Cummings. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the board, and we have two other board members present, Jeffrey Mullen and Nicholas Gray, and of course, Mr. Freeman, the attorney for the Corcoran Companies, is also present. So if you're ready to talk about landscape architecture for this project, we are delighted to give you the floor.
Wonderful.
Sure. I will begin sharing my screen now.
Thank you, Jen.
Not a problem. Let's see. Too many tabs open today.
Okay. Wonderful.
All right, so yeah, just so to give everybody a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight. First, Jade is going to describe the landscape plan and the public realm improvements around the building. And then we're going to follow up quickly on a discussion that we had last week about kind of the path to activating Adams Court. We've made a little bit of progress this week that we're excited to share. And then we just wanted to end on a few follow-ups about the traffic demand management that we were speaking of last week that Mr. Mullen was asking about. So just wanted to, make the most of tonight and, squeeze in a few more things, but we'll definitely try to keep it as brief as possible because, nothing like a brief ZBA meeting to round off the week. So Jade, if you'd like to
Mullen.
walk us through the landscape.
So Jade, why don't you have the floor and tell us about the landscape for the proposed project?
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction, Jen. Again, it's wonderful to be here tonight. Very excited about this project. I know we touched a little bit on the landscape 2 weeks ago. So I will review in a little more detail what we're thinking at this time. And one thing that I want to be certain everybody understands, and I think Jen's been pretty clear about this, we are so open to hearing feedback or suggestions or this is your space. And if there are any ideas that people have, we really welcome that. This is a really critical planning moment for us to make sure we're hearing what everybody needs and knowing we can't satisfy every single person at the end of the day. We really want to try to satisfy as many people as we can. So first, we'll start off on Franklin Street. I know there were concerns regarding how narrow that sidewalk is, which it is indeed narrow. Our early calculations were running around 6 feet there, but we're just trying to, as a landscape architect, we're trying to get trees wherever we can. And what we were envisioning in this area was using columnar street trees, and columnar trees are trees that are a little more narrow and taller growing, so they don't have, the branching isn't as wide as your typical street tree. And then we were proposing placing those columnar street trees in tree grates so that we could be certain to maintain accessibility wherever possible throughout the project. And then continuing on to around the corner to Bassett Street, that's where we will have the main entrance plaza into the building. We're dealing with, as we know from the civil presentation, we're dealing with some grade change in this area. So again, we're working closely with the civil engineer and the architect to incorporate an outdoor seating area, whether it's for the public or residents of the building, and also handicapped access into and out of the building. And then continuing around the corner up Bassett Street, we are, of course, maintaining the public sidewalk, working to increase and have wider sidewalks where possible. Again, an informal seating area, and you can see we have more trees there. Again, trying to incorporate green space wherever we can so that we can soften the public corridor but then also introducing plant beds, vegetative screens, and fence panels where possible to provide a little privacy for those first floor residential units. Then continuing the Franklin corridor. This space, we were talking early on with Jen and her team. When we first came to this project, this was a space that really caught our attention, because this is one of those interstitial urban spaces that, if done well, can really activate a space and serve as a strong connector to both sides of the project. So what we're proposing here, we don't want to overly complicate it. We're not dealing with a lot of space. Again, we have narrow dimensions, but where we can, we are hoping to have material improvements, particularly on the ground plane, introducing interesting, be it brick or pavers of some sort, just to really clean up the corridor and bring in a quality material feel. And then, of course, activating the space while maintaining pedestrian accessibility, visibility, safety, security. We think this would be a great opportunity to work in creative, artful lighting elements, whether they are the overhead catenary lights, which are those lights that you typically see on strings, or something a little more sculptural. But we're envisioning this corridor as a public place. You know, are there opportunities to work a % for art program in here, get people to come in, and can we paint a mural on the side of the building? Can we, right now we have thought of a bocce court, and the reason bocce came to mind is, again, it is an urban use that we have found to be successful in this type of an environment. Of course, we would need to work with civil to make it accessible for everyone. And because it's a narrow program element, we thought that it would be fitting. But we, again, are open to listening to the town and with any feedback, any ideas that people have for what we could do in this space. We were talking the other day, the design team, we were talking and understanding that as this area continues to grow in Milton, if there are opportunities for cafes to come in, you know, coming into this area, having some bistro tables and seating so that someone can have their hot chocolate or an ice cream cone with their kids. That's just, those are the details that we get really excited about. And then going to the interior where we have the parking lot, while there isn't a lot of open space, we do appreciate the fact that we have been able to provide a smaller central area where you can see we have a shade sail, and a shade sail is an overhead element that just is a tight canvas to provide shade and color. And right now we're proposing a pet relief area because where your pet's going to go. So this might be a nice area to give them a place to have a little relief. And then on the outskirts, the perimeter of the parking lot, again, shade sails, just to have a little visual activation, some shade on top of the structure, and have bicycle parking and or seating available for visitors or just people who want to just get outside. So that, in a nutshell, is what we are thinking about the open space. So Jen, I will hand it back over to you.
Well,
Oh, wonderful.
have you finished with your presentation?
This, well, John, so this, thank you, Jen, for advancing the slide. This is an example. These are some precedent images for some of the elements that I was just talking about. The upper left corner, the shade sails, and then the lower left corner, you can see those are the catenary lights. And if you really look at that narrow space in the lower left corner, this is really sort of the feel of what we are thinking at this early stage. Again, open to suggestions as we move forward. But it's how do you take a narrow corridor and just activate it, again, with pedestrian safety and accessibility in mind, but creating a real place that could be a nice place for people to walk to at night, early dinners, what have you. But just thinking about what is the future of this square in this town? How can we start to set precedent for how your town might be evolving over the coming years? The other imagery, opportunities for super simple seating. We don't want to overly design anything. Someone noted in one of the last presentations, Yes, there is not a lot of green space and open space on this project, but I, as a landscape architect, I don't see that as necessarily a negative, because oftentimes we find that when we have limited open space and green space, we do tend to have the opportunity to do more. There are more quality finishes, more artful design. So these are the types of spaces, again, that we get really excited about. And as you can see, some additional precedent imagery in the top right, that they're starting to break down how we'll have the public sidewalk, planted vegetated area, and opportunity for seating. So again, simple design. We're hoping for simple, elegant, green. We don't want to overly design it. We don't want to make anything that's too busy out here. We know this needs to be maintained. So our goal is to just have a simple, accessible, maintainable place that enlivens this area. And then the other imagery, we have a little bocce court, if it is of interest, and if not, we will remove that image. And then just other ways to activate the overhead. Again, is it artful lighting, but super simple elements to just create a place where people want to be. And then just breaking down what are the overall dimensions and scale of the space. These were some early cross sections developed by the architect, which were super helpful for us, but really starting to understand what is the scale of these corridors, because first understanding what the scale of these, the cross section of these streetscapes are, this is where it's really going to help us to understand which elements can we work in here so that we can comfortably accommodate these uses while not creating anything that's too overbearing. So the first section is a cross section in Bassett Street, and you can see we're dealing with roughly 85 feet horizontal distance, and then Franklin Street. So again, we're dealing with narrow-ish corridors, but again, for us, this is an opportunity.
So I'm not sure if anybody from the board has any questions about the landscape plan for Jade. I'm happy to go back to the overall plan or to any of the images that might interest you.
Okay, great. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions of Ms. Cummings?
Yes, thanks, John. So on the Franklin Street, it's a 70-foot cross section. Is that what I saw on the? I know it says 40, but what is the 70?
So the 70 is building to building. So that incorporates the street and both of the sidewalks.
Yeah, so that's a little misleading, right? I was thinking you could do a lot with 70, but it's only 40. So Franklin, could we go back to the image? So we saw a photograph. I don't know if it was last week or the week before of the FedEx truck. I think it was parked up on the sidewalk. And then at the beginning and there was there's a no parking zone there, right?
Mhm.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, and then at the beginning of this hearing, we maybe it was Ms. Cummings or perhaps Ms. Corcoran indicated the narrowness of the sidewalk. I wonder I have two questions. One is have you given any thought to some type of element along the sidewalk within the public way to prohibit curb jumping, to actually make the curb 100% usable for pedestrians? I mean, I understand that the introduction of an element to prohibit the curb jumping would tend to narrow the sidewalk, but given the choice between continuing to, have an enforcement issue on Franklin versus just eliminating the ability to do that at all, I might be interested in looking at that. A bollard or something.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to ask. If the town, if Jen, if everyone is agreeable to that, bollards would be a perfect solution. You could do a bollard, or you could also, I know in Cambridge, oftentimes instead of a bollard, they will introduce an additional bicycle rack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Multi-use, multi-purpose. I think that would be a fantastic idea if we could work those in so that they're alternating with the trees. And, again, when we get into real detailed design, really understanding the spacing to maximize, because we want to remember the need for snow plowing and maintenance. But I think a bicycle rack is an excellent idea because we can put it in line with the tree trunks and the tree grates and still maintain that accessibility.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate the fact that this is preliminary, but I also think that if we can begin to imbue some of these concepts into the design and make them more fundamental, I think you can work with them a little bit more creatively at this early stage, particularly when, you know, we've only had a couple of hearings and this is the second time there's been an issue raised with the sidewalk on Franklin. So that was one question. The other question is in looking at this plan, there's a little green area there in the interior. There's two green areas. I'm not as interested in the green area that runs horizontal with Bassett as I am with the green area that runs horizontally with Franklin. Is it possible to shift the building a little bit to the west to try to effectively gain some width on that Franklin Street sidewalk?
So the reason, I mean, that's a possibility. I wonder, I would definitely have to consult with Demella Schaefer, who's unfortunately not with us tonight. But the reason that we had the building closer on Franklin Street was because the zoning actually in that district and this portion of the site that like part of the building is sitting on actually doesn't require any setbacks. So it's still in the business district, so that we were playing on kind of the existing zoning that was already there. But there have been a lot of comments about the width of Franklin Street, the Franklin Street sidewalk. So that's a possibility. My gut reaction is it may cut into the parking on that surface lot area. But it's definitely something that we could explore. I mean, we've shifted the building a few different ways so far. And that has led to a reduction in the parking. So I'll definitely take that back to Frank. And I'm looking forward to the next few weeks and being able to have a little bit of time to digest all of the comments and everything before the next hearing. So we'll take that back to the shop with everybody and try to see if maybe we would, you know, if that's something that the town would be interested in, kind of sacrificing the interior green space for, you know, a little bit of extra sidewalk. We can definitely explore that.
Okay, yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but you know, if I don't know where the right medium is or the middle is between the tension in the versus, you know, the streetscape versus the width. But to the extent that we're creating a robust pedestrian block here, the sidewalks are really at a premium, and I feel like that's a worthwhile exploration, but I don't want you to interpret it that the Board of Appeals or a member of the Board of Appeals is proposing this. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something to explore. You know, that's the point. That's why we're all here, you know, so we might as well check it out. My other gut reaction would be that where that corner is, that would be most impacted by moving that section of the building up more.
Yeah.
And so it might create some friction with those units that are on that corner. But again, you know, we've got a pretty great team here, so I'm confident that, you know, we could at least look into it and bring something back the next time that we all meet. Well, next time we all discuss architecture probably, because I know that the next meeting is site civil and traffic.
I'm going to make one more general comment that you don't need to respond to, but I'm going to just make an observation, and you touched on it with respect to the sacrificing of the interior open space. To me, that's not a big sacrifice because there's a difference here between the public and private realm that is really apparent, and it manifests itself on Adams Court, particularly, which would consider public realm, versus the Bocce Court, which feels to me like a private place for residents to be. I think the sidewalk on Bassett, because it's on the exterior of the building, even if it isn't completely accessible, will feel more public than it is, and it will give the sense of space. And I think the interior grass strip looks like a place where dogs will hang out, and maybe, you know, you might catch some sun on the right day, but otherwise might be little used, and certainly isn't going to be used by anybody other than people in the development. So I think it would be helpful to identify what your proposal is in the public and private realm as we think about these things.
Definitely.
That's all I have.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Tom.
Mr. Gray, do you have any questions of the witness?
I don't think so, except to say that I like her idea of the bike racks functioning on the Franklin Street side, of using bike racks in that area as a way to keep the curb, prevent curb jumping. Are these the kind that are sort of, you are imagining sort of like a straight stick in the ground with a circle like I've seen in Boston and Cambridge? You know what I'm saying? Sort of like a circle in the top.
Yes, that is one of, for Cambridge, that's one of their standard bicycle racks. So the first question we are going to investigate is, does your town have a standard bike rack? And if not, I would propose one of those because they're super functional. They're, any bicycle advocate, they prefer those types, but we will, when we get to our site furnishing selection, that'll definitely be a conversation.
They work well and they're relatively low visual impact,
Yes.
but I can see them serving the function that I think we're looking for here.
Yeah.
But can I just, the only other question I have, and I think it's because I'm looking at this on a small screen, can you just point out for me exactly, maybe Ms. Corcoran can, exactly where the bocce court is? Is it that gray strip at the top?
Yeah, it's right there.
It's not blocking the access, right? It's of Adams Court. It's just, it's parallel to it.
Yeah, so
Correct.
there's actually a grade change too down there. So there is, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, is there a retaining wall in between the bocce court and Adams Court right there?
That is what we're going to have to look at when we get into the grading, because right now that corridor is running at very, very roughly 4.5%.
Yeah.
Which is great because we can have our accessibility without handrails, ideally. But when it comes to bocce, of course, it has to be a flat surface. So we will have to get creative about where we have the stepping and where we have the entry. It'll probably be coming down from the Adams Street side. But again, once we confirm that this is a program element that the town is looking to incorporate, that's what we will be working to make sure we accommodate. And then on either side of the bocce court, those little blue rectangles, those are seating elements. So trying to get it off of the main drag there so that we do maintain accessibility, but having a use.
And what's the surface of the bocce court usually made out of in this context?
Usually the surface of a bocce court is it's similar to a stabilized stone dust, because we don't want to have just raw stone dust out there because that'll become a maintenance nightmare.
Yeah.
So with stabilized stone dust, it's it doesn't migrate as readily, and that's what they use. But again, it can be an artificial turf, which is completely low maintenance. It can really be anything. The point is, having the space where somebody can go off the side of the corridor to gather.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nick. I don't have any questions of Ms. Cummings. So let me ask Attorney Tony Riley. Do you have any questions of Ms. Cummings?
No, I think Mr. Mullins actually covered a couple of the points that we had questions about, and understanding that the plans are apparently preliminary. The only other comment that we really had was that some of the plans look a little different than the renderings, and the number of trees and what kind of trees they were wasn't exactly clear. But if those things still need to be worked out and there's going to be further plans in the future, then we can just look at those and then talk about the details when they're available.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Freeman, do you have anything you want to add? Okay, I guess not. So let me just ask Bev, is there any person there in virtual land who has their hand raised?
Yes, Kathleen O'Donnell.
Oh, okay. Well, Miss O'Donnell, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. Welcome to the Board of Appeals again.
Thank you. I'm just going to Mr. Mullins' point about the green spaces that are facing the parking lot. I have a question because I'm not remembering the layout of the units in the buildings. And are there not units on the first floor that are looking out at those little green spaces on the parking lot?
There are units on that floor, yes.
Okay. So the idea of sort of backing the building out and taking out those green spaces would affect the views, let's say, from those first floor units, correct?
Yeah, so that would be definitely a consideration. I imagine that those green spaces are planting buffers also to block those windows for privacy, but I mean, would have to kind of look in, and I'm sorry that the architectural plans aren't in this show. But that would be, you know, another consideration that would have in the event that we wanted to move the building or shift it more towards the parking lot.
Thank you.
Bev, is there anybody else out there who has their hand raised and has?
There is. It's a Warren.
Good. Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm excited for what this will bring to Milton. I think it's going to be, you know, great to activate the area, bring a lot of life to the area. I've got a bit of experience working on Washington Gateway Main Street in design review, small time with the BRA, and I work in property management. So I have a good understanding of how designs flow through to actual use. In my experience, it's really important to have lighting on the outside of buildings. So they deter crime, they deter graffiti. I urge the board to consider maybe sconce lighting on blank walls to deter that kind of crime. In terms of the interior green space, I would find it advantageous also to prohibit crime and contribute to the neighborhood around it, to put that green space on the outside of the building on Franklin Street. In my experience, it will help to step down the topography of the building and to activate the use around the building. I also noticed from my experience that small pet parks like this don't get a lot of use. So the neighbors nearby end up with a little bit of that overflow, since about 43% of renters have pets. And I would just ask that, you know, in addition to the lighting and possibly a little bit more peripheral green space, that maybe the next design also show where fencing would occur, because in a lot of respects, you know, this development will be part of the community. And in order to do that, it has to be integrated with the community, not buffered against it in maybe such a defensive manner. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Great, thanks for your question. Let me ask either Jen Corcoran or Ms. Cummings whether they want to comment on those particular matters.
Very much appreciate the comments, Warren. So thank you for that. I think obviously, you know, safety isn't something that is covered through the comprehensive permit application, nor is it something that really has been brought up yet, but we appreciate the input there. And, you know, definitely one of the huge benefits I think that we're seeing from this project is going to be eyes in the street, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and kind of just creating a more active environment surrounding the building to deter, you know, the types of activities that you were talking about. Lighting, you know, a well-lit, you know, tree-lined street. I know that's probably a super boring term to hear at this point, but that's really what we're trying to create here. And in terms of the pets, you know, heard loud and clear on the people not picking up after themselves, which we would definitely, you know, find some sort of way to encourage. You know, that's part of the reason that we put the dog run, you know, on the site, so that people would have access to a place for the pets that are so common in these rental buildings. And we would really, you know, work very hard to deter our residents from, you know, leaving anything around the neighborhood that might not be welcome. So thank you very much for all of those comments. Jade, are there any fencing? Is there any fencing on the site? Because I'm not sure where could you speak to that, maybe, of where fencing occurs?
Sure. Definitely right now there is a fence around that pet relief area, because even though it's smaller, we have found on some of our other multifamily housing projects that even when they're small, when they're fenced in, it's just a place that the owners can quickly come out, and again, trying to take the burden off of the neighbor, you know, having people use the neighbors' yards. So that would be enclosed to keep the pups safe. And then along Bassett Street, we're thinking of using, vegetative screening, whether it's a hedgerow or an intermittent fence panel associated directly with the residents, so that the residents on that level will have privacy. But we're not looking to fence that entire Bassett Street corridor because we, as Warren said, I thought it was a really good point. We're trying to integrate. And most of this integration is going to happen at that street level. That's the pedestrian scale. That's the scale whereby we experience this place. So there will, of course, be a taller building next to us, but how we get the tree canopies in there, how we get the fence panels, how we get those hedgerows, those seats, and the width of that sidewalk to really play, that is how a person will be experiencing the space along all of these corridors.
Great. Thank you, Jade. Let me,
You're welcome.
Bev, is there somebody else out there?
Tim would like to speak.
Sure. Tim,
Tim Zawinski?
welcome to the Board of Appeals, Mr. Zawinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to chime in on two items real quick. And I think both were actually mentioned in my comments, my written comments that were submitted earlier. And I was glad to hear from Mr. Freeman that they intend to provide responses to those comments. That'll be very helpful for us. But, while the issues have come up, I just wanted to raise them here. And they're not questions or anything, just kind of comments for the team to think about. One is, if you're interested, we can get you some guidance from our Bicycle Advisory Committee and DPW on their preference for outdoor bike racks. I have been pointing development teams in the direction of the City of Boston guidelines that were just revamped back in January of 2020. I think they're really good. I also know the people that did them, and I trust them implicitly. But I think the recommendation tends to be either that sort of what we were describing, that sort of, circle hitch model, or just a sort of closed U-type, inverted U-type bike rack. They're simple, they're intuitive, they don't take up a lot of space. And so those are the two options that I've been recommending to folks, but we'll definitely get some input from the Bicycle Advisory Committee and the DPW on that to you all. And then the second point, and we don't have to go into tremendous detail, but I know we were talking about the grade change at Adams Court. I would be very interested to see how you negotiate that grade. It seemed from the renderings that the bocce court, sorry, we've got the deputy town planner is finishing dinner right now. Sorry about that.
Already on Tim.
It seemed from the renderings like that bocce court was sort of up top of a retaining wall, and my fear would be that we've got bocce balls kind of flying around as people are walking down Adams Court. And so if you can figure out that, that would be great. But also if that grade can't be kind of negotiated, maybe another type of activity, shuffleboard, something else, something that's a little bit more, less balls flying around and more, something else. So just, I think the concept of having some type of a fun, publicly accessible activity out there is really great. I think it's, I would encourage you to really be creative and innovative in that space. I think that's something that the square needs. But we also, mundane details like heavy stone balls flying around, we want to make sure we're careful about. That's all I've got. Thanks for the time.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate very much. Bev, is there anybody else who has their hand raised who wants to ask a question to be heard?
There are no more hands.
Okay, well, great. Ms. Corcoran, do you have anything else you want to add on this particular aspect of the case, landscape architecture? And if you don't, we can move on to your other comments.
Yeah, not really. And I also I'll reach out to Tim about maybe meeting with the Bicycle Advisory Committee too, because we'd love to do that. And we're trying to get out there as much as possible. Can facilitate either an outdoor meeting or a Zoom meeting or whatever. I know a lot of people are vaccinated now, which is exciting. So I'm really willing to do whatever to get as much input as we can. But we'll move on now to kind of the logistical planning that we've been kind of trying to do to really make this Adams Court activation a reality. We appreciated kind of the push to kind of get a plan in place for how to make this actually happen. And so you can kind of see the grade change in the retaining wall there. And I mean, I totally see Tim's comments about, the potential for that, although we'd try to make it as safe as possible. But again, bocce was kind of just a first idea and one that seemed to lend itself to the interesting space that it was, and but was something that we'll continue to work on. But so we were able to get in touch with the Simon Companies, who manages the building at Granite Ave for the Greenspan companies. And we're going to be meeting with them within the next couple of weeks just to kind of discuss the plans, see what they think, and just make sure that obviously as an abutter that shares the space, that they have no objections. But what we're trying to do in order to activate this space, at the end of the day, it's as simple as, pavers and lighting and, maybe some seating or something. In terms of the physical elements, it's really kind of a planning exercise and kind of how to coordinate a space in order to make it accommodate a few more uses that can really contribute to the overall experience of East Milton Square. So once we meet with Simon, we also want to be meeting with other businesses that are in the area to make sure that no one's using that space in a way that, any sort of activity there would inhibit it. But it's almost about kind of creating a timeline for what goes on in Adams Court during the day right now. So what time does the garbage get picked up from the dumpsters? What time do employees go to park in those lots? Is there a way to kind of create a schedule that, maybe some of those activities happen in the morning or in the wee hours, and then it opens up as a pedestrian accessible way at different times of day. So we understand that there are uses that are inherent to that space already. We want to make sure that we're not putting those out. We want to just incorporate them into what it could be, how often vehicles pass through, et cetera. So we're going to kind of get together with the local businesses. I was actually just talking to my mom last night, and she was saying that, Fitness Unlimited sometimes will bring classes out there to throw medicine balls against the wall or something. So we want to talk to all these businesses and really get a sense of, what it's used for now. But, I don't think that having more pedestrians go through there would really be too bad for that. I think that, I was laughing at kind of the medicine ball thing, because obviously don't want anybody getting hit by one of those, but something to consider, it's funny what happens at the dinner table. So would also then, move on from kind of the logistical elements of that list and consult the town and the community for kind of the wish list of activities that they would like to see. Is it graffiti wings on the wall for the Gen Zers to take their pictures with? Is it, seating that is movable so that, some hours of the day there are cafe tables out there and then they're removed for when the garbage truck comes through. And those are all things that, our management will be able to accommodate by bringing in and out. So we'd be happy to kind of own that space and, take responsibility for that programming. And then from there would just create a schedule for the plans and the uses. So that's the end goal, is making sure that, it's a space that is used and is, seen as a connector as well. It's not ready for prime time yet, but we've been also doing a lot of research on, the updates to the traffic lights and kind of the traffic improvements around East Milton Square. And we think that this will be a really great complement to that. In that, the spaces, the parking spaces that are next to the highway right now, adjacent to where the Manning Community Park is, those spaces right now are a little bit of, you probably don't think of those as a place to park if you're going to eat at Novara. But if this pedestrian walkway were to be, a lit up, vibrant space that might be a fun place to walk at night, you might just double, you might think twice about, it kind of opens up some opportunities within the square to connect places that maybe before weren't necessarily connected directly. Whether you're walking up Adams Court or whether you're going to walk around the building, down Bassett and up Franklin, both of those pedestrian routes, because of this project, will be vastly improved. Better lighting, improvements along the actual, sidewalk itself, well planted, and hopefully a little bit more active too. So that's kind of how we're thinking about, what this can bring to the neighborhood. And that's, the steps that we kind of came up with just this week. Obviously, we'll be finessing it and continuing to kind of, it will evolve over time, but this was the first thing that we came up with. So if anybody has any questions on kind of the pathway to that, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay, Jeff, do you have any questions of Ms. Corcoran?
I'm interested in the title.
Adams Court.
Yeah.
I mean, we can change it. I mean, Mullen Walkway sounds pretty good too.
Not the name.
No, he means the real estate.
Title to the land.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
He's not promoting himself.
Oh, that's a little bit embarrassing. So it's a private way and it's owned 50% by currently the Falcone. So it's with our site, and then 50% is the Greenspan company. So that's where the Simon management comes in. So I've heard the Greenspan company, I don't believe is like actively involved. My understanding is that they live abroad. And so Simon manages that building for them. And so manages that half of it. And so, and this is what I said in my initial, outreach to Simon, we're not asking them to do anything. And I didn't want them to be spooked by even the fact that we strung lights across their building, because even if they were to not want to participate necessarily, a lot of these improvements could be accommodated on our side. We could put lighting there. There's no windows facing it, so it wouldn't disrupt anything going on in that building. But it sounds, based on our initial, communications, that they're receptive to the idea. They said it looked great. And I mean, it's a nice looking image. So excited to kind of meet with them and see what they have to say.
Fair enough. What I think would be helpful is if the applicant submitted to the board some type of analysis memo, title report, indicating that they've got X rights and party B has Y rights, and together they equal the totality of rights, so that the representations being made by the board can be relied on to affect the purposes. What I'm trying to avoid, it's a long way of saying I'm trying to avoid having a third party come up and say, well, this is all well and good, but I've got a lot of other rights here that you haven't accommodated. So it's just like any other, to the extent that the improvements on Adams Court are going to be presented as an element of the project, it's just like any other evidence that you've either owned it or you've got the right to do the improvements that are being proposed. That's all.
Definitely.
All right.
So hopefully next time we come back to you, we'll have some more information on that.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Ms. Corcoran, let me just ask you two or three small questions. Number one, do you know how wide Adams Court really is?
So I need to double check on that. It's pretty narrow. I think it's either 10 or 12 feet. And so it's 50-50 between the Falcones and the Greenspan companies of ownership.
Okay, so if for whatever reason, the good faith reasons, the Greenspan companies was not anxious to participate in the development of Adams Court, so that you have your 5 feet, let's say to the left of the midline, you have 5 feet on the other side of that, do you not? So you could actually build out Adams Court 5 feet away from the building and still get your 10 feet in there. May have to change some of those brick walls and whatever, but you have the ability to do that yourself if they forced you to do it, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, this wall and everything, the bocce court could be eliminated and we can give a little bit of extra pedestrian space there. Would have to kind of dig into that and explore that, but it's definitely something, if we wanted to. I mean, I think if you were to light up maybe half of it, right? Unless there were to be some logistical issues of, they don't know what time their trash gets picked up, or they want the opportunity for cars to continue to go through without any type of schedule. That's really one of the only pitfalls that I can see, because otherwise it's kind of just an alley next to the building that's otherwise very underutilized. And so in the event that they say just that they simply don't want to participate, but they're fine with, people walking up and down it, I think the lighting that we could provide on our side would still be sufficient to encourage people to walk down there. And we'll be in charge of kind of half of it. I think the people would still probably walk down either side, so that might be an issue. But I get what you're saying about maybe potentially widening it on our side, and I don't see why that wouldn't be a possibility.
Now, let's hope they want to be good neighbors and be helpful to the project and the town. But if for whatever reason, good faith reasons, they don't want to participate, then Mr. Mullins' questions regarding the title to the property and liability issues all come into play, and it becomes much more relevant. So let's hope everything continues to go in a positive direction there.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, the initial outreach gave me hope, so we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks, but we'll definitely report back.
Well, we know you can be persuasive, and you
thank
certainly can be diligent. So perhaps you'll have good luck. Let me ask Nick Gray.
John,
Nick-
can I just ask?
Oh yeah, Jeff, please.
So one thing about that line of comment, it may be jointly owned, but it's one piece of infrastructure. So I really, I don't, I mean, I'm not the designer, but I think, it would be a real shame. And I don't think a particularly good public improvement to do something on half of one piece of infrastructure. It really is one piece, and it needs to be looked at as one. And I think there would be a whole nother way to look at it, and just almost like don't do anything until we can get something that can be a real improvement for the area. So enough said. That's just a caution. That's all.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that, Jeff. Nick, do you have any questions of Ms. Corcoran on this issue?
No, I second both of your comments, and I don't think I have anything further at this time.
Okay. Mr. Riley, do you have any questions of Jen Corcoran on this Adams Court comments and presentation?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Jen, do you have anything further you want to discuss with us tonight?
We have,
One pretty quick kind of preview into the next meeting, which is on transportation and site civil. But we just wanted to follow up on some
Let
of
me
the
stop you there. Just 1 second.
excuse me.
I missed a point. Just hold with me, please. Bev, is there anyone
Yes,
out there who has their hand raised and wants to be?
yes, there are two people. Cheryl Tagayas.
Okay, great. Mr. Gaius, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome to the.
Thanks for the.
It's good to see you again.
Thank you very much. Cheryl Tagayas, I'm a member of the planning board, and I just wanted to say that the planning board did comment on this, on the two major items that I've heard discussion of this evening, and that is the width of the sidewalk and the proximity of the building on Franklin Street. So I appreciate your discussion there. And the second has to do with Adams Court here. And I do really think that having this pedestrian connection would really be valuable for this business district. As we know, Granite Avenue is not a hospitable pedestrian experience. And Franklin Street is busy, as we know. And one of the things, so I applaud the effort that's been placed on this. And I just have a couple of suggestions for the team to think about. And that would be, there are parking spaces that have their headlights that face this area, which are seen in your rendering here. One thing that could be considered is the multi-use of those parking spaces, so that critical oftentimes to spaces like this is activation and program uses. So whether there's a street fair that could be planned, whether that's an art fair or farmer's market or some other kind of event, and maybe those parking spaces could be closed off for that time period. Maybe the paving isn't asphalt or concrete, but rather pavers. There could be a pergola incorporated that has lighting in it. Maybe that's the place that a student band could play at some point for an event. So I would like the team, if they would, to consider that edge further and how it can contribute to the activation of that alley space, that Adams Court. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Gaius. We appreciate your input. Bev, is there any other person present who has their hand raised and wants to ask questions?
Warren has his hand up again.
Oh, sure.
Yep.
Warren, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you perfectly.
Wonderful. Regarding the rendering that we're seeing in front of us, as it pertains to my prior comment about the fencing, because of the vertical drop here, would it be necessary to put a fence along that line to prevent any kind of mishaps? Like along the brick wall?
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know if that's for me to answer, but I think that the intention for this rendering was that the bocce court as shown was probably depressed a little bit, so there was a lip there to prevent balls from rolling out. But I do agree that there would probably be a need for something a little bit more robust, just to accommodate as many safety precautions as possible.
Yeah.
And that's something you can look into with your team.
Certainly.
Okay, great. Warren, do you have any further questions?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thanks for your participation, Mr. Lizio. Rev, anybody else who wants to be heard?
There are no more.
Okay, let me ask Ms. Corcoran, do you have any other issues you want to discuss with the board or bring the board up to date for?
Well, so we have one more slide that was just to discuss, and I know that we're going a little bit over the time that we had thought about, so I apologize for that, but I can keep this very brief. We just figured that since we had the meeting, we might as well respond to, so I know that a lot of the comments last week were kind of about, transportation demand and how we would manage that. And so we did, Carrie Pike, who everyone's met, who's our traffic engineer from Howard Stein Hudson, prepared a more exhaustive list than this, but I just wanted to share it with the crowd and with the board. So the professional management that we'll have in the building will be able to oversee, some of the transportation woes that might occur. So, from parking or loading and move-ins and deliveries, all of these things will have a professional management company there to accommodate who's experienced with things like this. And there are a few different ways that we can encourage use, multimodal transportation that's not people in single occupancy vehicles. So in the bottom left-hand corner, this image is the transportation screen that we were talking about, the transit screen that can be located in a lobby to show people, what time the bus will be coming, how many, blue bikes are potentially open, if that's something that we're able to explore, and just different, encouraging people in different ways to either walk or bike or take public transit. We can also provide an orientation packet to new move-ins that will give them all of these opportunities to learn more about the neighborhood and potential walking paths. The site is not very far from Wollaston T Station. I think it's like a little bit over a mile. So that's very walkable, for many people, especially people who might be moving from a more urban area to the to East Milton Square, or, still want the Falcones walk a lot. I know they're listening tonight, so shout out to the Falcones, big walking family. So, walking, I think, is a really viable option, especially around here. And then also incentives. So, having enough bike parking and having it, to be all around the site is a way to encourage people to bike, even if you move into this building and maybe you weren't super into riding your bicycle before. If you have a covered area to keep your bike in, then that might be enough to kind of spark that interest. We can also encourage ride sharing in different ways through carpools, and there are apps and everything that work for that. And also, there's a potential to have vehicle sharing program on site. So whether that's a Zip car, a Turo, a Get Around, or an enterprise car share. So this is, not an exhaustive list, and we're happy to submit to the board the full list of the potential TDM measures that we're looking at. But just wanted to kind of give you a sense of where we were thinking this week. And obviously there's more to be flushed out, but just kind of wanted to give a little preview into, some of the things that have gotten the wheels turning in our heads this past week after the first few hearings.
Okay, that's super. Thank you. I think that's very, very helpful. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions of Jen or any further items we want to discuss before we adjourn the meeting?
No, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Gray?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. How about Attorney Riley? Do you have any concluding comments you want to make, or are you content?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay, great, Mr. Riley. And Mr. Freeman, Attorney Freeman, are you all set here tonight? Okay, I think Mr. Freeman is up, has left it in Ms. Corcoran's capable hands. So as I remember our schedule, and correct me if I'm wrong, the May 6th hearing has been canceled due to the Milton Town meeting taking place, so that the next meeting that's scheduled on this application is the May 20th hearing, at which time the peer review traffic engineer and the site civil peer review engineer will testify so that we won't lose any time on this application. Does that comport with your memory, Ms. Corcoran?
Yes,
Okay. Do you have anything further you want to add here?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We have a lot tonight, so I'll leave you guys with that.
Okay.
We're good. I had forgotten to turn my microphone back on. All I had said was nothing further, but thank you.
Well, great. Well, it's good to at least to say goodbye to you. We wanted to make sure that that you didn't have anything else you wanted to mention. So then, without further ado, we're going to amend. Not going to amend anything. We're going to adjourn this meeting to May 20th at 7 p.m. To hear from the site civil peer review engineer, and I believe Jeffrey Dirk, the traffic engineer, will probably testify first. So
Yes.
without any further comment, thanks for your participation this evening. We appreciate all the additional information, and we'll see you on the 20th at 7 o'clock.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. We're adjourned.